Yo, SWAC talk. Light on the mic, it's a play. See Wells the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From gridiron to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. See Wells spinning wisdom, gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. I am your tour guide around the SWAC, C. Wells, coming at you, and we are going to talk about the returning receivers for each team for the 2025 season. These are just the guys who are basically the statistical leaders that are left. I will throw a disclaimer in here because I did my running back video and Dennis Palmer from Bethune-Cookman went into the portal yesterday. So everything's subject to change. You know, some of these guys may not even be the leading returning guy, but going by what I found in my research, those are the guys. And by the time this video come out, some of these guys might be gone. But it is what it is, and it's for fun. So we're just gonna keep on doing it like this. So if anybody on this list goes into the portal after this show, I got nothing to do with it. It happened after my show. I'm covered. But with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide, like I said, and make sure you hit those socials: Facebook is SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Also, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Central, I will be joined by Tanner Spearman. He is the beat writer for the Pine Bluff Commercial. So we're going to talk Golden Lions football. Got a couple other invites out. And again, if you're a Bethune-Cookman fan or Valley fan, man, if you know somebody that you would love to see cover your team on this show, hit me up on my socials. Facebook is SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76, email swagtalk76@gmail.com. And let's chop it up and make it happen, man. Because I want to kind of do these early season thoughts more from a perspective of people who are more familiar with these teams. And then once we get into the fall, I'll do my previews based on, my research. So I just want to kind of give other people opportunity to come through and shine. So if you're a Valley fan, a Bethune fan, Texas Southern, I'm working on my boy Lionel from PV versus everybody to come through next week, hopefully. So that'll cover that one. I got a couple of JSU people in mind, so that is gonna take care of itself. FAMU, same thing. Grambling, hey, if you got a G-man that you think should come on the show and represent, because I know a lot of y'all Grambling people feel like I don't like Grambling, but I'm always be fair. So if you got somebody you think you might want to see on here, hit me up and let's make it happen. Also, last bit of housekeeping, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share, and subscribe. We crossed over 1,400 subs, man. That's a big mark for me. And I'm very blessed and happy about that. Looking forward to getting past 1,500 now. So let's keep on grinding, man. Let's keep on growing and let's keep on rocking. So let's go ahead and get into this. And again, this list is subject to change. This list is, for some teams, may not be the most accurate, but some teams don't have updated rosters, so I had to kind of feel my way around. Some teams had updated rosters, and I thank you for that. It makes this series so much easier. But let's go ahead and jump into this. All jokes aside, First off, we have Alabama A&M Bulldogs. This team, as we know now, this team has a new head coach in Sam Shade. They seem to have aired the ball out a lot in the spring game. Um, I still think this is going to be a team that wants to run the ball, but they do have some talent at wide receiver, and they have a quarterback coming back who has experience in the SWAC, not necessarily in this offense, but he is experienced in the conference. And this offense led the league in passing at 260 yards per game, completed 56% of their passes with 22 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But they lost Keenan Hambrick, who was their top receiver. So that's a big drop off in terms of your overall leader in receptions. Who he actually was third in the league in yards per game at 66.2, and he had 53 receptions, which was also third in the league. So he was the number three guy, no matter how you slice it. He was third in receptions, third in yards, third in yards per game. He was just a big time target. I think he was third in receptions per game. So you lose that, but you return a solid guy, a young guy in DeQuadrin Welch. Um, he came on pretty strong. He played in 9 games last season, caught 23 passes for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns. So those numbers put him in a pretty good spot. He was 14th in the conference in yards per game. Um, so he's in that top 15. So that's a nice returning guy for you to look out for. Also, I think Devin Herring, I believe he's back. I think he had a touchdown in the spring game. He also has 19 receptions for 273 yards. So they do have some targets coming back in this offense. And that's a nice little security blanket, and a nice feature part for a passing game. Even if you're a team that want to run the ball more, having weapons that can catch the ball definitely are gonna make things easier for your offense. Um, as I've been doing in my previous 2 videos, kind of want to look at also anybody who may have had a conference season high. Um, and let's see, we'll kind of just go through these guys as they come up. Um, uh, all right, so next up on our list, as we don't have anything from Mr. Welch on this list, but next up on this list is Alabama State. Hornets they have a solid offense again. Um, Quarterback really came on. Kareem Key came on strong, late in reserve. You also getting Andrew Body back. Um, Asa Gregg was their leading receiver on the season, leading returning receiver on the season, um, behind Robert McMinn, who was a great special teams guy. Um, McMinn had 13 catches for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is an offense that didn't necessarily have a lot of great passing games, although they did have a couple 300-yard games. But they didn't necessarily have a lot of guys put up good numbers in terms of receiving yardage. Greg returns. He had 12 games of action, caught 15 passes for 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, this is an offense that wasn't necessarily the greatest, in the passing game. So you're kind of not really going to have a lot of flashy numbers there. But there's a lot of guys coming back in this unit. There's also a lot of new faces. So with continuity from your quarterback, as long as they stay healthy and you don't have that quarterback curse again, I think this is offense that will get better. Last season they were 11th in passing offense at 143 yards per game, and a lot of that is a byproduct of playing multiple quarterbacks, and having a guy who played the bulk of the season, having his ups and downs. Um, they had a couple 300-yard games last season, but they also had a couple sub 100-yard games last season. So that variance is very wild, and that kind of makes things a little bit more loosey goosey to kind of keep tabs on. But I expect these guys to kind of step up and make some things happen. So again, not huge numbers for Mr. Greg, but he is a guy who is capable of making big plays for this offense. He's a sophomore. Welch is also a sophomore. So these are young receivers. For the most part, the majority of these guys returning are younger guys. So that definitely bodes well for the conference moving forward. Next up is Alcorn, and their guy is Tyran Warren. Um, he's a junior. He had 10 receptions for 309 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, this is an offense that didn't necessarily pass the ball well. They were 10th in the league in passing offense at 149 yards per game. They only had 7 touchdowns on the season through the air, so not a lot there. They didn't really have a lot of offense there. They threw the ball 309 times, which was tied for ninth with Jackson State of all people, who had a great offense. They just didn't have to throw the ball a lot, but they still had a tremendous offense. But Alcorn was a run first team, and they struggled a little bit in consistency passing the ball, and so obviously that's going to reflect in the numbers of your guys. Um, and because it didn't necessarily have anybody kind of step up, Chuck Griffin was their leading receiver as tight end. He had 43 catches on the season for 374 yards. Didn't have a touchdown last season, but that's a guy who was very solid. Warren finished 22nd in the conference at 28.1 yards per game. Like I said, he had 10 catches, 309 yards, and the 3 touchdowns. So he had three of Alcorn's 7 touchdowns. So he was very productive. Almost 1 out of 3 catches was a touchdown. So you can't really ask for much more than that. And a guy like that, he can be a deep threat for this team. Average over 13 yards per catch. That can help. That can help this team. He averaged over 30 yards per catch. I looked at the wrong column. He averaged over 30 yards per catch, so that's definitely a big play guy. With a new starting quarterback, whoever it may be, a guy like this could be a good weapon for you if you choose to open up your offense and go over the top. So I look forward to seeing him in action and seeing him have more production and just getting better. Next up is Bethune-Cookman, and I say this with a lot of hesitance because I didn't see it yesterday, but because they had a lot of guys going to portal, I don't know if this guy is gone or if this guy is back. Um, I don't even know if he, I had to kind of piece it together, but Malik Huggins is their leading returning receiver as far as I can gather. He's a redshirt senior. He played in 12 games this past season, had 37 catches, 543 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That puts him pretty solidly in the top 10. He was 7th in the league in yards per game at 45.3. He was, he was a pretty solid guy in terms of yards, total yards. He was 7th there. He was 9th in receptions. So, he was a guy who really was kind of a top target for them. This is, again, an offense that kind of took a little while to get going. And they also had a tight end in Thomas Nance, who is gone, that had 33 receptions. So, they kind of had 2 or 3 other guys that kind of made some plays with them, but their offense never really got going this past season. And so, it makes it a little bit tougher to put up those numbers when your offense was 8th in passing at 184 yards. They did have 14 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. I thought Cam Ransom was a very solid quarterback toward the end of the season, but they just couldn't, they couldn't really get any wins. And, when that happens, you're gonna come up short. Malik Huggins had a season high 97 yards against Texas Southern. That was his top game on the season. Um, he also had a season high of 7 catches in the Florida Classic. So he had the opportunity to be productive. He had 6 catches against Southern. Um, So he kind of had some solid games late in the season, um, and so you kind of look for him to kind of continue that. If again, if he's still there, because like I said, there was a lot of guys who hit the portal from Bethune-Cookman yesterday, and I don't want to be wrong, but this is a guy who I think really had a chance to be a big time playmaker for this offense, and a guy that can a guy that can make those plays. And he also had the conference's single game high in receiving yardage. I said his high was 97, but his single game high was 177 yards on 7 catches against FAMU. So he had a big game in his last game. So and that was a big offensive game for them. Period. So that's kind of that kind of could be a forecast of what could be ahead for them. But we're losing so many guys now. There's more question marks on this team again. Um, we just don't really know where this team is and where they stand. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I really don't know where to go with this team. I kind of had them. I don't want to say I had them penciled in anywhere in particular, but I kind of had them, with a possibility of getting better, with more experienced guys, but it just didn't work out that way because they haven't really been able to hold on to guys. But that takes us to our next team, and that's FAMU. Again, their top guy is Quan Lee, replacing Jamari Gassett. Lee played in 12 games. He caught 27 passes, had 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a guy who kind of started to make some things happen later in the season. Um, when you have big play guys, um, you need other people to step in there. And I think he did a solid job of that. Um, and I expect to see him continue to be a big time target. In an offense that's gonna need some leadership and gonna need some playmaking and some security for all those quarterbacks, whoever that may be. Having a new quarterback, regardless of whether it's junior or anybody else, having a guy out there that you can hit on big plays, I think that's always vital. So he is a playmaker. He showed the ability to make some big time plays. Got in the end zone a couple of times. I can see him being a breakout guy in this conference. There are some really good returning guys, and there are also a few guys that are not necessarily proven guys in this returning group, but he's right there in the mix. So I expect him to continue to be that guy. Maybe he takes that number one receiver spot and becomes that great family receiver that they've had forever. I'll be interested to see how he continues. He is a redshirt junior, so he has another year or so left. So we'll see how he produces. But definitely a good guy to have returning when you don't really know what your quarterback situation is. You got guys that can make plays, and so having that always makes things better for you as an offense. Um, Next up is Grambling, and Grambling lost Javon Robinson, who was basically their whole passing game. He had 43 catches on the season, 507 yards. He had 1 touchdown on the season. Like I said, he really was, there was nobody else really that close to him. Grambling offensively, they really struggled passing the ball last season. They finished ninth in passing offense at 170.6 yards per game. They had 11 touchdowns. So not necessarily a lot there. They did finish with 2,047 yards. But again, not a lot there. They kind of spread the ball around a little bit, but nobody else really took hold. After losing some guys, the top returning guy is a tight end. and that's Marquise Harris. He's a redshirt sophomore. He has 7 catches for 183 yards and 1 touchdown. Uh, not the greatest numbers returning, but when you look at what they lost in terms of a guy like Robinson who had tremendous production, there really wasn't a lot there for this team. So a lot of this stuff is open now, and we'll wait. We kind of gonna wait to see how this team fares as they move forward. They're gonna have a new quarterback. They got basically a new backfield. This offense is gonna be kind of helter skelter. Um, it's going to kind of be a little helter skelter. When you look at in terms of receptions, Jalen Johnson, he finished the season with 13 receptions, but he had less yards than Harris. So they basically did it by yardage. So I did it by yardage, but Johnson did have 13 catches for 178 yards. He also had a touchdown. So there are some guys who are coming back who did have decent numbers, but nobody really stood out after your next guy, your top guy had 43 catches. The next guy after that had 19. So, you know, there was a drop off after that. So there's a lot open for this Gremlin team. There's a lot of playmaking spots there. And like I said, with a new, with either with a new starter, regardless of who it is, whether it's a guy like Ashton Fry who's already on the roster, or a guy like T said who's a transfer, or any other transfers that they brought in, you're going to have a new quarterback who hasn't really played in this offense much. So, again, having a tight end that you can get the ball to is always a great factor in this league, or, any other receiver who is on that team that's capable of making plays. And those positions, to me, seem to be wide open. So, Gremlin, they've been pretty, aggressive in getting guys out the portal, and they've signed some good high school guys. I think this team has, if they can put some things together, they can be better than they were last year. They just didn't really have a lot of consistency last year, and injuries to quarterback position kind of set them back too. So this really was kind of a unusual type of situation for them, based on what they came into the season expecting. So it'd be interesting to see, who takes the reins moving forward. But right now, Harris is their top guy. He is a redshirt sophomore. Jackson State returns Isaiah Spencer, and so he's a guy who has, he led the team. He was the top dog in receiving, and a huge playmaker for this offense. Um, Again, not an offense that was, they didn't necessarily have to air it out. And they ran the ball extremely well. They led the conference in rushing. And their passing game did exactly what you wanted to do. And that's make the plays where they at, take the deep ball, go over the top on these guys, kind of, if once they start to creep up to stop the run, you go over the top, and you had targets that were more than capable of making teams pay. And Spencer was a guy like that. He's a guy. He's 6'2", 185. So he has some good size. He can make the plays for you. They also um, returned Jonas Fortillion, who was also a great big wide receiver, big target. So this offense is going to continue to be good. I don't see any real step backs from this team. And when you look at what they did passing the ball, like I said, they averaged 189 yards on the season, but they threw for 27 touchdowns, which actually led the conference. So for a team that threw the ball 309 times again, which was the ninth most in the league, or the third or fourth fewest, however you want to look at it, they really were very productive. And that's what you want from offense. They also completed 60% of their passes. So they were a very efficient offense, even though they were run first. They had some weapons in the passing game, and they really were able to capitalize on that. And Spencer was one of those guys. Like I said, he finished last season with 35 catches for 660 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he again is a guy who is a top guy in the conference, returning statistically. He was 11th in the league in receptions. When you look at, he was fifth in yardage. He was uh, he was seventh in touchdowns. Also, you have a guy in Jalen Dupree who's a young guy. He also had 5 touchdowns. So there's a lot of weapons in this offense. Now, I don't think they're gonna miss a beat really. And Spencer was actually sixth in the league in yards per game. So that's a big playmaker for your offense. Um, and that's a guy that you can kind of look to be productive for you. And then you return, like I said, a guy in Jonas Fertillion who caught 41 passes last season for 627 yards and 11 touchdowns. So he had more receptions. Spencer had more yards. This was really a nice 1-2 punch. And then then Fortillion had 11 touchdowns. So you can really pick your poison with this passing attack. And when you look at kind of where they stand, and they added Nathan Rember. Don't let that slide. I mean, that Valley's best receiver. They added him to the unit, and I'm not, like I said, I don't count transfers in on this list, but you're getting a guy who led the conference. Who was second in the conference in reception yardage, who was second in the conference in receptions, and that's a big time playmaker to add to this group. So um, again, like I said, I'm not counting Rembert as the top returning guy for Jackson State, but Rembert had a 163-yard game this past season. He had a 130-yard game this past season. Spencer did catch 123 in the Celebration Bowl. Um, Rembert also had another game. He had 300-yard games. He had a 107-yard game. Uh, so, and then you throw in 91 from Fortillion. This is going to be a very dangerous passing attack on top of the running game. So this offense, I don't think is going to miss too much of a beat, and that's dangerous for everybody else. So um, this is one of the few teams I think they have a deep receiving room. They may have the best receiving room coming back. I'll hear arguments from anybody else, but when you look at production, there's no better group coming back than this group. So um, that makes this group head and shoulders really right now in terms of production better than pretty much everybody else. I hear arguments for anybody else, but my vote goes to JSU in this one. And like I said, Valley they lost Nathan Rembert, who again was a huge target last season. Um, he caught 70 passes, which actually tied for first. He had over 1,000 yards, which was second. He had 4 touchdowns on the season. He had a 76-yard reception last season. He had 86 and a half yards per game. And this was a Valley offense that actually was not that bad passing the ball when you look at it. They finished sixth in passing at 198 yards per game. They did throw a ton of interceptions though, but they had 15 touchdowns. Um, and so they were really solid because they had Carrick Ross and they also had Jackson Davis, who was a young guy at tight end who kind of had some issues earlier in the season. Didn't get on the field until the midpoint of the season. He played 9 games this past season. He's a junior now, but he played in 9 games this past season. Caught 30 passes for 366 yards and 1 touchdown. So once he did get on the field, his numbers really improved, and their offense, kind of had a little bit of get up and go to them. He was 16th in the league in receptions, ironically tied with another tight end, Dupree Fuller from Southern. They both had 30 catches. Davis finished 17th in yards on the season, and he was 11th in yards per game at 40.7. But this is offense that's losing a lot. They're losing their quarterback, they're losing their backup quarterback, they're losing their running backs. They lost their top receiver. So, and on top of that, they have a new coach. So having a guy like this could be a very valuable thing. And again, I don't know, you got to survive this last portal window. Maybe the guy, maybe he stays, maybe he doesn't. But, this is another guy I'm kind of surprised was still there. So we'll see how that shakes out. But he is their top guy. He's one of the top tight ends in the conference. There's only a couple who are considered to be really top guys, and he is one of those two. And I think he's a very valuable weapon for whoever is the quarterback for Valley, and opportunity for some easy throws and catches for this offense. Next up is Prairie View. Their top guy was Jeremiah Ratliff. He finished in 11 games. He finished with 17 catches, 158 yards, and a touchdown. They lost some big play guys. James Burns came on really strong later in the season, and he played in 9 games. He caught 32 passes. He had 505 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a few huge pass plays, and that was kind of like the guy who kind of took over the reins. Shamar Savage didn't necessarily have a great season last year. Trajan Spiller, he finished with 32 catches as well for 393 yards and 1 touchdown. Savage finished with 27 catches for 465 yards and 4 touchdowns. So you kind of dropping all of that, and so there's a lot to be, there's a lot of opportunity to be had in this offense under Coach Jackson. Um, we'll see. Again, this is another team where we'll see, how things fall into place. The quarterback position is solid. Um, I think he got a solid running back in Connor Wisham. Maybe this be the year that he takes that next step. If this offense can develop some consistency, which they didn't have last year, that can really make this team, a lot better. Um, they were not a bad team passing the ball last season, even when you look at um, the inconsistency. They finished with 199 yards per game. They had 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, completed 55% of their passes. They threw the ball 340 times, which was sixth in the league. They had 184 completions, which was 187 completions, which was eighth in the league. So they weren't great. They weren't bad, but their passing attack probably was the best part of their offense. And a lot of it is buoyed by James Burns coming on late with those huge games receiving. So, excuse me, we'll see how they continue to get better offensively. And again, new coach. So we'll see. A lot of this is up in the air. Um, and that's a great thing. A lot of new opportunity and a lot of chance for development for guys who hadn't had opportunity. Next up is Southern. I went backwards. Let's see. All right, next up is Southern, and Southern offensively, their passing attack honestly was not for what they had in terms of quarterback play last season. Their passing attack was actually pretty solid. They did have turnover issues, throwing 13 interceptions, which was the third most, and they threw 15 touchdowns, which tied them with Valley for fifth. But they had 207 yards per game through the air, which I think put them at fourth place. So they were a pretty solid team. And I mean, when you consider that they had three different quarterbacks playing extensive action, that's actually pretty good. And they threw the ball for 2,701 yards. That is third. So this offense was not, they weren't efficient though, because they only completed 51% of their passes, but they weren't really efficient, and they weren't really a big play offense. But they some kind of way they made a way, and they returned some big weapons, although they don't necessarily have guys with that name value. But they returned Darren Morris, who is their top returning receiver. He has 37 catches for 434 yards and 3 touchdowns. Averaged 36.2 yards per game. He finished 10th in receptions. Also, Dupree Fuller is back. He had 30 catches again for 370 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they have some, they don't really have a lot coming back in terms of experience, but those two guys are definitely going to be good targets for Jalen Woods if he holds on to the job. And with a team gonna be with a fresh running back room, I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe throw the ball a little bit more till the running game gets going. So that could be a bump in numbers for guys like this. Morris has shown that he can hit the big play down the field, whether it's a catch and run or it's just a deep pass that he catches in stride. So he has the ability to make those big plays, and so I think he can be a valuable asset to this offense um, moving forward. Last season, he did have a 96-yard game against Alabama A&M, and so he did have he had that big game there. And that was a that was a much needed effort for him because that offense really at times was not playing well in that game. So giving him the opportunity to make a big play, I think that's huge. He also had 2 touchdowns against Alabama A&M, which tied for the season high in the conference. So when you have a guy like that, that could make things a lot better for your offense. Next up is Texas Southern. I did have a few questions with this one, but I'm assuming it is the guy on your screen, which is Trenton Leary. He had 11 games on the season, 41 catches, 417 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Those are great numbers for an offense that really struggled to pass the ball last season. They finished last in the league in passing yards per game at 117. They only had 8 touchdowns. They did only throw 8 interceptions, but they threw the ball 232 times, which was the second fewest in the conference. They one of only 2 teams that throw the ball less than 300 times. So they did not throw the ball much at all last season, and they ran the ball um, 417 times on the season. So they really did not necessarily have a great offense. They were actually last in total plays. So they didn't play they played a slower kind of pace. So they didn't really have a lot of possessions, but they did they leaned on their running game so much and just never really got it going in the passing game. But Leary was a good target for them. He finished tied for seventh in receptions with 41. He had 417 yards, which was 12th in the conference. He also had 3 touchdowns, which tied him with a few guys. And he averaged 45. He averaged 37.9 yards per game on the season. So when you look at a guy like that with an offense like they had, he was a very valuable weapon, and I would love to see them throw the ball a little bit more this season, just to have it be a factor. He did have a game against Pine Bluff where he caught 7 passes, which was his season high. Um, so he can be a target. Um, I don't think he didn't crack the single game yardage list, but being able to be able to be targeted that many times and make plays in a win, that's great, especially for offense that, like I said, did not complete a lot of passes. And so I think it's very valuable for the offense to be more efficient passing the ball and just bumping those numbers up some. And Leary is a guy who can do that. He also can be a solid return guy too. Um, and so that's something else to kind of take into account in his um, if you just look at him making some things happen. So that takes us to our final team on the list, and that team is UAPB, and obviously they lost the best receiver in the conference, the all conference guy, um, Giovanni Gibson. He led the league in basically everything but touchdowns. He had 70 receptions, 1,215 yards. He had 9 touchdowns on the season. Averaged 17.4 yards per catch, 5.8 receptions per game, 101.3 yards per game. And that's even with a couple teams starting to figure him out later in the season. Um, but he still was a guy who did everything for them. This team really got hit hard in the transfer portal. They lost, I think, their top top four receivers, which takes you way down the list before you get to a returning guy. And their returning leader is a tight end. His name is Jackson Isaac. He's a junior. He had 9 games of action, 15 catches, 107 yards, and 1 touchdown. A lot of the production from this passing offense is gone. Um, Makai Hagan's the quarterback. He's at Lamar now. So, he's gone. Like I said, Gibson's gone. Dawkins is gone. Monty Rowan is gone. They lost a lot of guys. They lost a lot of guys. And so there's a big opening for every position in that passing unit. And this was an offense that averaged over 219 yards per game, which was third in the league. So they really were, they really put up some good numbers. They threw the ball 347 times on the season, had 184 completions, finished the season with 17 touchdowns. They only had 8 interceptions. So this wasn't for a team who everybody at a certain point knew that they were going to throw the ball. I thought they still did pretty well. They did struggle later in the season as teams kind of figured it out a little bit, and the running game never really totally got going. But there is a lot of opportunity on this offense for guys to shine as a quarterback and a pass catcher. So I probably can safely say that the guy who is the returning leader will most likely not be the leader at the end of the season, but we don't really even know what their offense is going to be in terms of production. But there are, like I said, there are some solid guys returning. Like I did with my receiver list. You're losing in your top in terms of yards per game. Um, you're losing your top 5 guys. Well, you're losing four of your top 5 guys, and you're returning number 6, number 7, number 8, number 11, number 13, number 14, number 15, number 17, number 20, number 21, number 22, number 24. So you're returning a lot of production in this conference at wide receiver. And I think, especially losing Dennis Palmer, I think that makes the receiving core of the conference even stronger because you have such a deep unit at Jackson State, and you have a lot of teams returning a lot of production. So even though a lot of these teams don't have established quarterbacks, they do have established pass catchers, and so that makes for an interesting thing. Can these guys put up similar numbers or better with a different quarterback at the helm? Somebody will, somebody won't. But that's going to be the interesting journey of this ride. And like I said before, this is all up in the air because all of this can change at any minute. But I do like the overall receiving core of the conference. And where I said that there isn't much star power at quarterback, I think there's potential for star power at running back and receiver. So I think both of those units in the conference are in good hands, no pun intended. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC Seawells, signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.